Hello, women of the sisterhood. It is so good to be with you today. I hope you have been enjoying the study of the Sheroes of the Old Testament. I am praying that you have been able to take some life nuggets from each woman because, really, ladies, no one woman can describe the many facets of our personality. In fact, Shaka Khan and Whitney Houston said it best. I'm every woman. It's all in me. So today, ladies, we have come to study another Shero, and I'm excited about it. And what we want to talk about today is Ruth, y'all, the story of Ruth. Ruth is one of only two books in the Bible named for women. The other is Esther. And so as we talk about the story of Ruth today, I want to invite you because y'all, Ruth has been through a lot. Ooh, child, she's been through a lot. But guess what? She's a survivor. And not only is she a survivor, she shows us how to thrive in the midst of loss and in the midst of the difficult seasons in life. So we can learn a lot from Ruth today. And Ruth is a woman of resilience and faith. Now, Ruth survived her trials and she teaches us how to come back when life tries to take us out. Many people would have given up. Some would have just thrown in the towel. But Ruth hangs on to God. She clings to her faith and she stands strong in the midst of all that's going on in her life. So come here, Ruth. Tell us your story. Ruth's story began at a very dark time in the people of Israel's history, God's chosen people. They had become very disobedient. They were engaging in all sorts of violence. They were worshiping idols. But then guess what? Here comes Ruth. Ruth goes against the tradition of her culture and she chooses God despite of what's going on around her. And we can identify with the culture that opposes God, that glorifies sin. That was the culture of Ruth's day. But Ruth was not ashamed to place her faith in the God of the Hebrews, the one and only true and living God. Now, Ruth was a Moabite. So let me tell you a little something about the Moabites. Y'all, we have to go all the way back to Genesis 19 to get the tea on them. Now, the Moabites were born out of an incestual relationship between Lot and his two daughters. I said it, an incestual relationship between Lot and his two daughters. Now, God had destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, and he preserved Lot and his family, and he sent them away so that they could be saved. So they were in a small town and living in the cave. So his daughters became fearful that they wouldn't have husbands, they wouldn't be able to have children. So they came up with this scheme. So they decided to get Lot drunk and sleep with him so they could have children. And they did it. And unbeknownst to Lot, he fathered his daughter's two sons. And to those union were born Moab and Ben Ami. And they would become the founders of the Moabite nation and the Ammonite nation. And so that's where Ruth's story begins. But what I love about Ruth is just because you're born out of foolishness don't mean you have to allow foolishness to be born into you. So Ruth takes a stand for God, and that's who she is. So let's get to the text today. When we look in Ruth chapter 1, we're going to look at the first 18 verses. Now it says, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and two sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi. And the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her two sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion died, and Naomi was left without her two sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, her and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her two daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home. My daughters, why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons? Who could become your husbands? Return home. My daughters, I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." Wow. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to stay with her, she stopped urging her. Look at the story of Ruth. Wow. The first lesson that Ruth teaches us is the lesson of resilience in losing and leaving. Resilience in losing and leaving. Now, pain, no one enjoys it. In fact, the normal human response is to avoid it at all costs. But Craig Groeschel describes it this way. He says, pain teaches us to depend on God. Pain moves us to prayer, and it purifies our motives. Pain is a part of growth. If I avoid all pain, I am avoiding growth. Everyone responds to loss differently. Some give up, some blame God, and yet there are some who amaze us with their resilience. Ruth had lost a lot. Ruth lost her husband, she lost her brother-in-law, and she lost all of her rights in an instant. And then she was about to leave the land that she called home, losing and leaving. If we stop and look at our lives in this time of this pandemic, we see loss all around us. In fact, many of us have endured loss, and we have been required to leave some things behind as we have adjusted to this new normal. But in spite of the loss we see around us, there are people that we can look at their lives and we can see the resilience in their lives that gives us encouragement and hope. What is resilience? Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It's toughness. And what Ruth teaches us is how to be resilient in losing and leaving. Ruth had to face loss, and she had to leave the familiar to travail the unknown. The second lesson that Ruth teaches us is do not overstay your time in grief. Do not overstay your time in grief. Now, Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heaven." Verse 4 says, "A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance." What are you saying? I am saying that it is perfectly normal to grieve the loss of a loved one, to grieve the loss of a relationship, to grieve the loss of a job, or any other loss that we have in our lives. But I encourage you to not stay there too long. Do not stay in your grief too long. Ruth teaches us how to pick up the pieces and move forward in our grief. And in fact, resilience is the ability to move forward in the midst of life's challenges. Ruth could have cried, "Woe is me," and she could have stayed back in Moab mourning, but she chose to move forward in her grief. Nelson Mandela said it this way: "I learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." The brave man or woman is not he or she who is not afraid, but he or she who conquers that fear. Ruth teaches us what it means to not overstay in our grief. The third lesson that Ruth teaches us is to serve others by placing their needs above your own. Serve others by placing their needs above your own. Ruth placed the needs of another above her own. Notice that Ruth chose to stay while Orpah chose to go back to her people. Now, we really can't throw a lot of shade on Orpah because Naomi painted a pretty bleak picture for both of them. So we really can't get mad at Orpah for going back. But what we do learn from Ruth is that she stayed with Naomi. Now remember, during this time, women only had rights through their husbands and their sons. So Ruth and Orpah had lost husbands, and they were young ladies who had not yet had children. So they had lost all of their rights. So we can't really be mad at Orpah for going back. But Ruth decided to stay. And the reason Ruth stayed is because she chose to place the needs of another above her own. Surely Ruth had lost, but Naomi had lost even more. Not only did Naomi lose her husband, she also lost her 2 sons. So Ruth decided to focus her attention on Naomi instead of herself. What a remarkable sacrifice. Because Ruth chose to serve Naomi instead of going back to Moab and putting herself back on the market to find a husband. Now, I want to say a little note here for the ladies. If we are not careful, we can allow the issues in our lives to consume us and to prevent us from serving those that God has called us to serve. Now, God was positioning Ruth for her blessing. Many of us are missing out on what God has for us because we refuse to assume the position of service. Now, I want to say this. You didn't ask me for this, but I want to drop this for you. Perhaps it was easier for Ruth to later make the transition from singleness to married because she was already used to placing the needs of another above her own. Single ladies, it's practice time. We need to be practicing on placing the needs of another above our own. Who are you serving? Who are you making sacrifices for? If I were to poll some of my married ladies, I know they would say, girl, I wish somebody would have told me. Or, you know what? I wish I had more time to practice. Because this ain't no joke. Serving someone else and placing the needs of another above your own. And the final lesson that Ruth teaches us is that love through high quality relationships is the greatest blessing of all. We can find that in 1 Corinthians 13 when we look at verse 3. It says, if I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship so that I may boast, but I have not love, I gain nothing. If we go on down to verse 13, it says, and now these 3 remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. We were created for love. We were created for relationships. And what we see in this story of Ruth is that relationship between her and her mother-in-law. This relationship was characterized by selflessness, kindness, loyalty, and faithful love. Now, I recognize that for far too many, that does not describe the relationship they have with their mother-in-law. But I say to you, whether you're the daughter-in-law or the mother-in-law, or you treating the other person in the relationship like you want to be treated. I know you're saying, Pastor Jefferson, you don't know my mother-in-law. You don't know my daughter-in-law. You're absolutely right. I don't. But what I do know is that God wants to get the glory out of every relationship we have, every single one. And so now the text does not give us much information on Ruth's family, but we do know is that she did have family in Moab, and she left her family to be with Naomi. And in fact, Ruth says in verses 16 and 17, she says, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and I. Wow. What a remarkable commitment that she had to her mother-in-law. What an amazing amount of love and respect. And what I love about that is that this relationship demonstrates the greatest gift that God gives us is love through high quality relationships. Because it is through this relationship, y'all, that she would meet Boaz. And then from Boaz, she would give birth to a son named Obed. And he would give birth to Jesse, who would be the father of David, from which the lineage Jesus would come. So think about this, ladies. This is serious. Now, here's Ruth, who is not an Israelite. She is found in the lineage of Jesus in Matthew 1 and 5. And so this is very significant because think about what would have happened had Ruth decided to remain in Moab mourning. She would have missed out on all the blessings that God had for her. And not only did God give her material blessings, he blessed her most of all with the love of people in her life who wanted the best for her. When you read the next few chapters of Ruth, you will see that Naomi wanted the best for Ruth, Boaz wanted the best for Ruth. The greatest gift that God gives us is people in our lives who love us enough to want the very best for us. Now, Ruth was a woman of resilience and faith. And now I hope that over the next few days, you will reflect on 4 questions that came out of this lesson. First, is there something in my life that I need to grieve that I have not yet taken the time to grieve? Number 2, is there something in my life that I'm grieving that I've been grieving too long that I need to move on from? Number 3, who is God calling me to serve in this season? And how is he calling me to serve them? And the final question, number 4, is to list out the love you have received through high quality relationships. And ask yourself, am I giving the love that I'm receiving? If I'm not, create an action plan. If I am, praise God. The Shero we studied today was Ruth. But remember, ladies, you are somebody's Shero because you are a woman of faith and resilience.